I said this. You didn't listen to me. Why didn't you listen to me? You start arguing. You start getting bitter. You start getting angry. You're getting frustrated. You're starting to argue and fight. Guess what? This happens for a long time. This happens for weeks, months, years. Not weeks, though, I'm sure, but definitely months and years. You're going to end up in separation. You're going to end up even in a divorce.
Innocent love. Innocent love.
Hello everyone, this is Geoffrey. Thank you so much for coming to our YouTube channel, Innocent Love. We really appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about the third part and the last part regarding misunderstanding, okay? So this part is going to be called the consequences of misunderstanding. Now, if you have not seen the first two videos, I suggest you go back and watch the first two, okay? The first one was called Why Am I Misunderstood? The second one was called Why Am I Misunderstanding My Partner? And like I said today, message will be the consequences of misunderstanding, okay? So I have actually, I have 5 reasons of what the consequences could be if you have a lot of misunderstanding in your relationship, okay? So number 1 is there will be unnecessary arguments and fights, okay? So because you have no understanding or you're misunderstanding one another, what's going to happen is that you're going to start arguing with each other on a regular basis, you know? So the more you misunderstand each other, you're going to be arguing about every little thing in the relationship, you know? It could be regarding, miscommunication. It could be regarding, who did this and who did that, okay? So the fact that you are making mistakes and, you're not communicating well and you have all these misunderstanding going on, you will start to argue and fight. So those are one of the consequences that will result if you have all these misunderstandings with each other, okay? So this is why it's so important that you guys communicate, that you talk, that you really be open to one another, so you're not going to fall into this trap. Now, I believe that this is not going to happen right away. That's not going to happen from one day to the next, okay? So this is going to be a while before this is happening. But the more you start to misunderstanding one another, no matter if it's his fault or her fault or whatever, you're going to start arguing and fighting about so many different things you have no idea, okay? So make sure that you always be open and you communicate to avoid this dangerous trap, okay? Number 2 that I believe is a consequence of misunderstanding is going to be bitterness, okay? You're going to start turning bitter. So after you've been fighting and arguing all the time and you keep misunderstanding one another about so simple things that you could simply if you just be open and just talk and not hold things in, you could simply avoid these things, okay? So what's going to happen is because of the constant misunderstandings that you're going to be having, you're going to be turning sour and bitter inside of you, okay? And you're going to create this resentment towards one another, okay? This is also what I believe is a consequence of misunderstanding, that you become bitter. You become more bitter and bitter over time, okay? And I believe personally this is going to get worse, okay? So make sure that you avoid this trap by, like I said again, making sure you communicate well with each other, because in the long run, you will become more and more bitter with your partner when you keep doing this, okay? So this, I personally believe, is the second reason of what the consequences could be of misunderstanding, is that you're becoming bitter towards one another, all right? Number 3, what I believe of why you are misunderstanding, and the consequence of that is that you will become angry and frustrated, okay? Yes, is this another form of bitterness? You become angry and frustrated, okay? You become more angry every day, and is this going to be like a pile of crap on top of each other, just growing and growing and growing and getting worse and getting worse and getting worse? I believe that misunderstanding can cause so many different problems if not dealt with it properly in time, okay? You really need to deal with this and be open and communicate because you're going to get bitter, you're going to start arguing, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get angry. All these things are going to happen by simply misunderstanding one another. And like I said before, this is not going to happen right away or over the first couple of weeks. It's going to take months, maybe even years before this happens. So make sure that you communicate well. I'm saying it again to avoid this trap, because I personally believe that this is another consequence of misunderstanding, that the fact that you're becoming angry and frustrated, okay? Number 4 of what I believe that is also a consequence of misunderstanding is that you will have a weak bond in your relationship, okay? You will have a weak bond because of this constant communication. You know, your connection that you have towards one another is weakened, okay? It is very brittle and very deceptive, okay? So meaning that anything that could happen, like a little tornado in your relationship, a little trial that comes along, it's gonna break your relationship, and you guys are just gonna fall apart, get separated or whatever, because your bond got so weak, because you're not communicating well and you have all this misunderstanding. Because I personally believe that if you really understand one another and you continue to work on your understanding with each other, that you will create a very strong bond with your partner. So the fact that you guys are not really communicating well, you have this constant misunderstandings, what I believe the consequences will be is a weaker bond in your relationship, okay? You will be very weak. And like I said before, if things happen, you know, a famine comes into your life, a trial, a challenge, a tribulation comes into your life, this bond will break, okay? And you will fall apart, okay? So misunderstanding is a bad thing. And this is why I believe that communication is so important, openness, and anything like that. And finally, what I believe personally the consequences of misunderstanding could be is divorce and separation, or separation and divorce, okay? At the end of the day, guys, you know, because of this constant misunderstanding, over and over and over again, you have this constant misunderstanding, miscommunication. He did this. Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you tell me that? Oh, I thought you said this. Oh, I thought, no, I said this. You didn't listen to me. Why didn't you listen to me? You start arguing. You start getting bitter. You start getting angry. You're getting frustrated. You're starting to argue and fight. Guess what? This happens for a long time. This happens for weeks, months, years. Not weeks, so I'm sure, but definitely months and years. You're going to end up in separation. You're going to end up even in a divorce, okay? People don't believe that. They believe that, why? What do you mean? Yes, by just simply communicating, you guys can get into a divorce. Miscommunicating, I'm sorry. You know? It's not just cheating or financial problem or with the children or physical abuse or whatever. It is simply just misunderstanding, miscommunication, constant arguing, all this kind of stuff. If it's long enough, it can drive a man or a woman insane and will file for divorce. That's why you see so many people when they're having a divorce, and they're right in there. The reason of why divorce is because of differences. You know, what they really mean is that they just don't get along with each other. You know, they're arguing, they're fighting, they're misunderstanding one another. And because of all these things, you know, after a long time, they file for divorce, you know? And this is something that happened to me in my personal life, that it took 10 years of, you know, miscommunication and misunderstanding and all this kind of stuff. And I learned from that as well. But it took that long for me to actually have a divorce in my relationship. So it is not good. And this is why it's so important that you really communicate with each other. It is extremely important. Those are the 3 topics that I wanted to talk about, okay? Now let me really quickly go ahead and let me recap that, okay? Unnecessary arguments and fights. Number 2, there's bitterness. Number 3, there's anger and frustration. Number 4, there's a weak bond in your relationship. And number 5 will be separation and divorce, okay? Those are personally, I believe, the consequences if you are having miscommunication in your relationship. So in order to avoid these, okay, make sure that you communicate well with each other, be open, okay? If you guys have not seen the previous videos regarding miscommunication, I suggest you watch those now so you have really the full perspective and the importance of that in order to keep your relationship strong and healthy. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so. Make sure you like, share, and comment. It will help us out. We want to grow this channel. If you have any questions regarding this or any comments, please leave it in the comment section below. I will make sure I read it. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and peace out.
Innocent love.